Welcome to Impact Makers Radio, featuring industry thought leaders sharing problem-solving insights to help grow your business and live the life you love. And here's your host, Stewart Andrew Alexander.
Hi everyone, Stewart Andrew Alexander here again, and on this segment of the show we have divorce coach Jason Levoy, and he's calling in all the way from New York City. Now listen to this, folks. Jason works with singles and couples who can't afford an attorney by coaching them, now wait for this, to represent themselves in their own divorce. Now, sounds really interesting and I can't wait for him to come onto the show. So without any further ado, welcome Jason Levoy. Jason, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks, Stuart. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Let's jump straight in then, Jason. Can you, in your own words, just briefly describe the people you serve and the kinds of situations they find themselves when they eventually come to you for your help?
Well, I was specifically a divorce coach, an attorney for a number of years. I practiced exclusively in family law, doing divorces and custody issues. So I serve people who are thinking about getting divorced, in the middle of a divorce, and even people who are already divorced and still going through issues, whether it's custody or other things. And I help them when they don't have an attorney to help represent them. So in family courts, if you're going to get divorced, you have to go through the process one way or another, either with or without an attorney. And so I focus on the people who don't have attorneys and try to get them where they need to be so they come out on the other end alive.
In terms of the people who you help in representing themselves, what are some of the biggest misconceptions out there surrounding that particular topic?
Well, that's a good question. I think people don't give themselves enough credit by and large. Most people, when they have to go to court or attorneys are involved and, God forbid you have to go in front of a judge, they start to freak out. And I get it. It can be intimidating. Judges wear black robes. They tend to sit higher than other people. But, people can learn to represent themselves with confidence and integrity. And that's what I do. They just have to get coached and they have to know get the knowledge and learn the procedure. But it's possible. And people don't give themselves enough credit and think they can do it. And if you can't afford an attorney, you don't have another choice. So you can either try to wing it, which I don't recommend. And I've seen it all too many times. But the biggest misconception is that you can't do it. And that's just not true.
So for somebody who sat out there right now today listening to the show then, Jason, how long would it actually take to be coached and to get in that position where you're able to represent yourself?
I'm going to give the typical lawyer response, and that depends.
Right.
But it's true. It really depends on the person, and you have to really look yourself in the mirror and be honest with yourself about what you're comfortable with, what you're capable of. If you're somebody who already has a level of self-confidence, doesn't mind speaking in front of groups or public speaking in general, then you're ahead of the game, as opposed to somebody who, doesn't have great self-esteem. I would consider maybe a real introvert and gets nervous and has anxiety issues. That person is going to need a lot more preparation than the former person.
But in either case, it's possible to get to that point where you're able to represent yourself.
I believe it is. I've seen it done. And that's why I do what I do. And it's possible not only because everybody's capable of learning the information and, preparing for a court appearance or, to draft a legal document that they have to present to the court. But you don't have a choice, especially in the United States. Like I said, if you're going to get divorced and you don't have an attorney, well, you're still going to get divorced. So they're going to push you through the process, whether you have an attorney or not. So you just don't have a choice. You have to learn what you need to know.
Excellent. So, in terms of somebody who you've actually helped, somebody who came to you and they're in that unfortunate position of going through a divorce or even thinking about going through a divorce, share with us, if you will, a case study, an example, and obviously keeping client confidentiality in mind of somebody who you took from point A, where they came into your office, were needing help, and you took them to point B, where they made that transition, where they were able to confidently represent themselves. And tell us about the outcome of that.
Sure. I can give you two quick examples of that to show you the kind of different ways I work with people. One was a guy I worked with a little bit ago. He was already divorced, but he was having custody issues. And he had gone to at least 2 attorneys, I believe, and they wouldn't take his case. They told him he didn't have a chance. It was a losing proposition, and told him too bad, so sad, pretty much. So I bumped into this guy randomly at another event, and we just started talking, and he found out what I did. I found out he was having some problems, and before I even took him on as a client, I just decided to help him, because I try to do that. I try to help people when I can. And so I threw some information his way. He took it, read some articles. Eventually, I started working with him on a closer basis. Long story short, I coached him in a relatively short period of time, mainly by just giving him the information that he didn't have before, and he was able to represent himself and get through his custody issues. And now he sees his kids on a regular basis. And I keep in touch with him on a regular basis, and he's always telling me, Jason, I'm going skiing this weekend with my son. I'm going to the amusement park this weekend. All these things that he can do now that a lot of people perhaps take for granted, but he couldn't do that before he met me. And I was shocked when attorneys that he was willing to pay refused to take his case. You don't hear that too often, but so that's one example. Another example would be a woman I'm currently working with now. She's at the beginning of the process. The divorce hasn't officially started yet. Nothing's filed in court. She's only had discussions with her husband about, the state of the marriage, and she's made up her mind, though, she wants to get divorced. So if you work with me, what I do is, before we get started with that process, you got to do a lot of preparation, right? Because half the battle of getting divorced, especially when you're representing yourself, is being prepared. So I'm working with her, telling her what documents she needs to gather up, telling her what she needs to start thinking about before we even do anything, or before the first paper gets filed at the courthouse, because she's going to be representing herself. I'm her coach. I'm not her attorney. I may be an attorney, but I'm not her attorney. So that's the difference. And so she needs to be prepared and organized to go to court, so she's not overwhelmed and confused as the process officially starts. So we're in preparation mode now. And once that is over, I'm going to walk her through the process, pretty much hold her hand through each phase of the divorce. And at each phase, I will coach her on what she needs to know, what she needs to do. And, there's no guarantees as far as the result goes, of course, but I'm going to help put her in a position to succeed, more so than if she was just winging it by herself.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the unknown pitfalls that are out there. Unknown pitfalls that people might not be aware of, but should be aware of, and especially when it comes to the topic of representing yourself in your own divorce.
Sure. I'd say one of the biggest pitfalls going through the divorce process, especially by yourself, is not educating yourself appropriately or to the level that you really need to. Google is everybody's friend these days, and all you have to do is some basic online research, and you could find out a lot of information. Now, you got to be careful, because you can't believe everything you read online. Just because it's in writing and it's online doesn't mean it's accurate and should be trusted. But if you go to trusted websites and you know where to find this information, you can find a lot online. But you have to educate yourself, because the biggest pitfall that I see from people representing themselves is that they show up to court and they're sitting in the courtroom waiting for their case to be called, and they look like deer in headlights. And then their case gets called and they go up before the judge, and they either say the wrong things, and that pisses the judge off, and that's not good, or they don't know how to present the information that they have. They might have a good case and they might have the facts to back up their case, but if they're not presenting it correctly or persuasively, it's not going to make a difference. So that's the biggest pitfall, is not being prepared, and not being educated on the law and the procedure of how it works.
Right, because no matter how emotional things are, right, because I presume going through a divorce is a very emotional experience, the court's not really interested in that, right? How you're feeling and how unfairly you may have been treated in your marriage. You just got to have all your ducks lined up in a row, right?
Absolutely. That's a great point, Stuart, because judges, and I don't mean to be unsympathetic, but they don't care. The court doesn't care why you're getting divorced. They just want to get you divorced and move on to the next case, right? So, but that's not the case for the people actually going through it. It's a very personal experience, and I understand that. But that's the difference. I always say, one of my mantras is, divorce is nothing more than a business transaction. And I think it rings true. But the problem is, when people can't separate the emotion from the business at hand, that's when things get sticky and they go off on a tangent, and, they kind of get stuck in the mud, so to speak. So, right, the judges, they're not interested on, why you're getting divorced or who hurt who. They are interested in the facts, and getting you divorced in the most equitable and reasonable manner.
Okay, Jason, so you shared some great information so far, and I'm sure somebody who's listening to the show right now wants to know a little bit more about you. Who is Jason Levoy? So could you, in your own words, just briefly share with us a little bit about your background and your education and your experience, as how it relates to the topic of divorce. So if you could just do that for us briefly, that would be great, Jason.
Absolutely. Becoming a lawyer was not my first occupation, if you will, but it's something that I always had a desire to do, and I kind of did it a little bit later on. So after I went to law school and passed the bar, I practiced divorce law and family law exclusively for a number of years. And after doing that, I remember it like it was yesterday, the day that I decided no more. I was helping somebody. They were dealing with a custody dispute, and basically I was arguing with my client and the other attorney over 1 hour of time on who was going to pick up the child on a Saturday. And we were spending hundreds of dollars, and it was taking hours to try to negotiate a 60-minute period. And then I threw my hands up in the air after that phone call. I remember I hung up the phone, threw my hands up in the air, and I said, no, I'm not doing this for the rest of my life. And so I didn't feel like I was helping, and that's why I originally got into it, was to help. And nobody was ever happy at the end of it. And so I figured, what can I do to really help people? And who needs the help the most? So that's kind of where I began my divorce coaching career. I noticed that there were so many people in the courtrooms who kind of had that deer in headlights look and were unrepresented, but yet had to go through the process anyway. And I wanted to help them, kind of like a legal services program. And so I decided to focus my efforts on becoming a divorce coach. And so I don't represent people directly anymore in their divorces. However, I coach them. And I work with individuals in all different capacities, in all different stages of the divorce. And I've developed a very unique online divorce membership community where people can join and meet other people going through divorces. And I have video courses that I've created from scratch, and all geared to walking you through the divorce process as if I'm holding your hand and I'm standing right next to you. And so that's my aim. That's what I do, is I work with people one-on-one, and I also run this divorce membership community that's accessible anywhere you are, as long as you have an internet connection, and help people in that capacity as well.
Jason, if there's anybody out there who wants to connect with you, how would they do that? Where would they reach you?
I would say the first place to try is my website, which is easy to remember. It's my name. So it's jasonlevoy.com.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, you can email me. You can contact me, ask me any questions. You can read more about my membership community. And I have a blog. And I also write for a variety of and a number of different publications online. So if you just Google my name, you'll probably find a whole bunch of that as well.
Okay, so finally, before we go, my last question then, Jason. For those people who are thinking about a divorce or in the midst of a divorce or have been through a divorce, what would be your absolute best piece of advice for those people?
Prepare. Educate and prepare. That's it. I mean, and that makes all the difference. Educate yourself and prepare yourself, and you'll do fine.
Thank you so much for your time today, Jason. You've shared a lot of great information that our listeners are surely going to benefit from. So for those listeners who might be experiencing divorce right now, thank you also for joining us in this amazing interview with Jason Levoy, one of the top divorce experts around today. So again, I'm Stewart Andrew Alexander, and we'll be back again shortly with some more divorce professionals in this, our series of divorce-related conversations. So until then, take care, have a great day, and we'll talk real soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Impact Makers Radio. To listen to all past, present and future industry thought leaders and trendsetters, visit us at impactmakersradio.com.